Bullies thrive on fear until they meet someone who isn't afraid. Jaden Collier never went looking for trouble. At 17, he had enough on his plate. School, training, helping his dad around the house, fighting. That was the last thing on his mind. But sometimes trouble finds you whether you want it or not. It was a warm evening in Fort Worth, Texas. The kind of night where the streets hummed with the last bits of traffic before settling into quiet. Jaden had just finished a long training session at his dad's small martial arts studio, sweat still clinging to his skin as he rode his bike down a familiar route. This was his usual shortcut home through an old strip mall parking lot that had seen better days. The asphalt was cracked, the lights flickered overhead, and the only sign of life was a few cars parked outside a 24-hour gas station. That's when he heard them, the low, rumbling growl of motorcycles. At first, he didn't think much of it. Texas had its fair share of bikers, and most of them kept to themselves. But as the roar got louder, Jaden could tell something was off. He glanced over his shoulder and saw them, 3 of them, spread out like vultures. They weren't just passing through, they were following him. Jaden's grip tightened on his handlebars. He wasn't the type to panic, but he wasn't stupid either. He coasted toward the sidewalk, thinking maybe they'd just roll past. But they didn't. Instead, they slowed down, blocking his way forward. The leader, big, broad-shouldered, wearing a cut-off leather vest over a stained white tee, flashed a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Brent Bulldog Rollins. Jaden had seen him before, hanging around that run-down bar a few blocks over. "Hey, kid," Bulldog called out, his voice rough like gravel. "You got a death wish cutting us off like that?" Jaden frowned. Cut them off? He hadn't even noticed them until now. "I was just riding home," he said, keeping his voice calm, measured. No fear. That was rule number 1 his dad always taught him. Never let them smell fear. One of the other bikers, a lanky guy with a scruffy beard, scoffed. "That right looked more like you were trying to get cute, swerved right in front of us." Jaden exhaled through his nose. This was going nowhere fast. "Wasn't trying to cause trouble," he said, trying to shift his bike slightly to the side. "I'll just go around." But Bulldog wasn't done playing. He put a heavy boot forward, planting himself right in Jaden's path. "You hear that, boys?" He chuckled, cracking his knuckles. "Kid thinks he can just go around." The third biker, a stocky guy with a chain hanging from his jeans, leaned against his bike with a smirk. "I don't know, Bulldog. Maybe he needs a little lesson in respect." Jaden felt his heartbeat settle into a steady rhythm. Not fear, not panic, just focus. His dad's voice echoed in his head. "If you can walk away, walk away. If you can't, end it fast." Jaden looked at the 3 men, Bulldog, scruffy beard, and chain guy. They were playing tough, puffing up their chests, waiting to see if he'd break, but they had no idea who they were messing with, and they were about to find out the hard way. But Bulldog had one more thing to say, and this time his voice carried a threat Jaden couldn't ignore. Bulldog took another step closer, his boots scraping against the rough asphalt. The street light overhead cast long shadows stretching across the empty parking lot. "You look like a smart kid," he said, his tone shifting, trying to sound reasonable. But there was an edge to it, like a knife just waiting to be used. Smart enough to know when you've pissed off the wrong people. Jaden didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there gripping his bike, calm, controlled. "I didn't cut you off," he said, keeping his voice level. "I was just riding." Bulldog let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's so." Scruffy Beard stepped up now, circling a little to Jaden's left. "Thing is, kid, we don't like punks thinking they can just do whatever they want out here." Jaden's eyes flicked between them. He wasn't boxed in yet, but they were working on it. Bulldog in front, Scruffy to the side, chain guy still leaning against his bike, watching with amusement. "You carry cash on you?" Scruffy asked casually, like he was talking about the weather. Jaden exhaled slowly. "There it is." So this wasn't about some imagined slight on the road. It was about power, control. 3 grown men who thought it would be fun to shake down a teenager for money. "No," Jaden said. Bulldog's smile faded. "Now see, that's a problem." He reached out slow and deliberate, like he was testing the waters. Jaden knew this game. They wanted to push him, see if he'd crumble, but he wasn't going to. Bulldog grabbed the handlebar of Jaden's bike. Maybe you should. Jaden moved fast. Before Bulldog could finish his sentence, Jaden twisted the handlebars sharply, yanking them out of Bulldog's grip. The motion was quick, controlled, just enough to send a message. Back off. Bulldog's grin dropped completely now. Scruffy let out a low chuckle. Oh, we got ourselves a little tough guy. Changing Guy finally stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. What do you think, Bulldog? Maybe we ought to see just how tough he really is. Jaden's heart rate stayed steady. No adrenaline spike, no panic, just preparation. 3 men. Big, slow, predictable. He could handle this if they made the first move. Bulldog tilted his head, eyeing Jaden up and down. Maybe for a second he was reconsidering. Maybe there was something in Jaden's stance, feet grounded, shoulders relaxed, breathing even, that made him hesitate. But then Scruffy had to open his mouth. You scared, Bulldog? He taunted. Kid ain't even sweating. That did it. Bulldog's pride got the better of him. He lunged big, telegraphed, easy to read. A grab to the shoulder meant to overpower. Jaden reacted instantly. He pivoted his body, slipping Bulldog's grip like water slipping through fingers. A simple shift, smooth and controlled, sent Bulldog stumbling forward off balance. The second his back was exposed, Jaden struck. A sharp, precise palm strike between the shoulder blades. Not enough to seriously hurt, but enough to send a message. Bulldog staggered forward, catching himself before he fell. He whirled around furious. You little. But Scruffy was already stepping in, reaching for Jaden's arm. Wrong move. Jaden snapped his wrist free with a quick roll, then countered with an elbow to Scruffy's ribs. The impact was solid, a deep, sickening thud. Scruffy doubled over, gasping. Chongai cursed under his breath. Oh, hell no. But by now they weren't as confident as before. Jaden didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He just stood waiting. Ready. Bulldog clenched his fists, breathing hard. You think you're some kind of ninja, huh? Jaden didn't answer. Didn't need to because the fight wasn't over yet. But now the bikers were realizing this wasn't going to be as easy as they thought. For a moment, there was silence. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic from the main road. Bulldog wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, nostrils flaring. Scruffy was still hunched over, one arm wrapped around his ribs, glaring up at Jaden like he couldn't believe what just happened. Shanghai cracked his neck. All right, he muttered. No more games. Jaden kept his stance neutral. Not aggressive, not passive, just ready. Bulldog took a step forward, rolling his shoulders. His pride wouldn't let him back down now. You got one good shot, kid, he growled. But that was your last one. Jaden didn't respond. No wasted words, just focus. Changing Guy struck first. He came in fast, faster than the others. A looping hook aimed right at Jaden's jaw. Jaden leaned just out of reach. The punch sailed past, throwing Chongai slightly off balance. In the same breath, Jaden stepped in, planted his foot and drove his knee straight into Changi's stomach. A sharp exhale, all the air forced out of his lungs in an instant. He stumbled back, gasping. Scruffy was next. Even though he was still struggling to catch his breath, he reached out trying to grab Jaden's arm. Another mistake. Jaden redirected the grab, twisted Scruffy's wrist, and used his own momentum to flip him over onto the asphalt. Scruffy hit the ground with a grunt, rolling onto his side, wheezing. Now only Bulldog was standing. Jaden turned to face him. See. Controlled. We done here. Bulldog's chest rose and fell. His face was flushed, hands clenched into fists. But something had changed. That bravado gone. The biker who had been grinning at the start of this had disappeared. Still, Bulldog was the leader, and leaders don't just walk away without trying to save face. His hand moved to his back pocket. Jaden caught the movement instantly. He wasn't pulling out a phone or a wallet. It was a knife, a cold, ugly-looking thing with a jagged edge. Bulldog flicked it open with a sharp snap, gripping the handle tight. You think you're real tough, huh? Jaden's eyes stayed locked on the blade. A weapon changed everything. Fights weren't about looking cool or proving a point. Fights were about survival. Jaden shifted his stance. If Bulldog thought he was just some flashy kid who didn't know how to handle a real threat, he was about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Bulldog took a step forward, raising the knife. "Let's see how tough you are now." Jaden stayed completely still, waiting, calculating. Bulldog lunged. Jaden moved fast. Instead of retreating, he stepped in closer than Bulldog expected. Before Bulldog could react, Jaden's hand snatched his wrist, locking it tight. One sharp twist. The knife clattered to the ground. Bulldog barely had a second to react before Jaden delivered a precise elbow strike to the side of his face. Not a wild punch, not reckless, controlled, effective. Bulldog staggered back, clutching his cheek. His eyes darted to the knife on the pavement. But before he could make a move for it, Jaden took one step forward. That was all it took. Bulldog saw it in Jaden's eyes. The fight was over. Not because... See, Jaden had landed the hardest hits, not because he had embarrassed them in front of each other, but because he wasn't afraid, and that was more than Bulldog could handle. He took a step back, then another. Behind him, Guy was still hunched over, groaning. Scruffy was slowly pushing himself up from the ground, cursing under his breath. Jaden glanced down at the knife, then back at Bulldog. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. And just like that, Bulldog made his choice. But the real consequences of this night were just beginning. Bulldog took another step back, chest rising and falling like a man trying to swallow his own pride. He glanced at his boys, Scruffy still clutching his ribs. Guy bent over trying to catch his breath. They weren't in any shape to keep going. For the first time since this started, Jaden saw something in Bulldog's face that hadn't been there before. Doubt. Bulldog wiped his mouth, spat on the ground, then shot Jaden a glare. "This ain't over," he muttered. Jaden didn't move, didn't flinch. He just watched. "You hear me, kid?" Bulldog's voice had lost its edge. "You're going to regret this." Jaden let out a slow breath. "Go home," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Bulldog's jaw tightened. He hated this. Hated the fact that a 17-year-old had just humiliated him in front of his crew. But there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. He turned, muttering something under his breath as he walked back to his bike. Scruffy limped after him, wincing with every step. Guy gave Jaden one last look, something between anger and grudging respect before following. The roar of the engines filled the night air as the bikers revved up one by one. Aiden stood there still as stone as they peeled out of the parking lot, disappearing into the distance. And then silence. No shouting, no threats, just an empty parking lot and a single streetlight flickering overhead. Jaden exhaled, letting his muscles relax for the first time. His hands were steady. His breathing was even. He looked down at the knife still lying on the asphalt. He didn't pick it up, didn't need to. Instead, he reached for his bike, dusted off the handlebar where Bulldog had grabbed it, and swung his leg over. He had nothing to prove, but before he could ride off, a voice cut through the quiet. "You all right, kid?" Jaden turned his head. Across the lot near the gas station, a man in his 52nd stood leaning against his truck. He wore a flannel shirt, jeans, and a ball cap pulled low over his brow. The kind of guy who had seen a lot in life and didn't rattle easy. "I'm good," Jaden said simply. The man nodded. "Called the cops when I saw those boys circle you." Jaden glanced toward the street. That explained why the bikers took off so fast. "Appreciate it," Jaden said. The man studied him for a second. "You move like someone who knows what they're doing." Jaden just shrugged. "I train." The man let out a low chuckle. "Yeah, I figured." In the distance, the faint sound of sirens echoed through the streets. Jaden sighed. The last thing he needed was to explain this to the cops. But what he didn't realize was that this night wasn't just going to end with a police report. The consequences of what happened here were about to follow him home. The sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the gas station's windows. Jaden stayed where he was. Running would only make things worse. A police cruiser rolled to a stop and 2 officers stepped out. One older, stocky with graying hair. The other younger, sharp-eyed. Their uniforms looked stiff under the harsh streetlights. The older cop, Sergeant Douglas, scanned the scene. His gaze flickered to the knife still lying on the asphalt, then to Jaden, standing next to his bike like nothing had happened. "You the one who called?" Douglas asked, looking at the man by the truck. Yeah, the man said, arms crossed. Kid got jumped by some bikers. Handled himself, though. The younger cop, Officer Bennett, raised an eyebrow. Handled himself? He looked Jaden up and down. You all right? Jaden nodded. I'm fine. Douglas exhaled, kneeling to pick up the knife with a gloved hand. Who pulled this? Jaden hesitated, then answered. The big guy, Bulldog. Douglas frowned. Brent Rollins. Jaden didn't know his real name, but the look on Douglas's face said it all. They knew exactly who he was. Bennett muttered something under his breath. Damn, that guy's been a headache for years. Douglas turned to Jaden. So, what happened? Jaden kept it simple. I was riding home. They followed me, tried to corner me. One of them pulled that. He nodded toward the knife. I stopped them. Douglas narrowed his eyes. Stopped them? Jaden didn't answer. He knew better than to talk too much. The man by the truck spoke up. I saw it. The kid didn't start nothing. They did. Douglas sighed, rubbing his jaw. Figures. He turned back to Jaden. You got parents we need to call? Jaden hesitated for just a second. His dad was ex-military, strict, disciplined. The last thing Jaden needed was to deal with a lecture about staying off the rada. But lying wouldn't help. Yeah, he said. My dad's at home. Douglas looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, let's get you home. But Jaden didn't realize that going home wouldn't mean the end of this. Bulldog wasn't the type to let things go. The ride home in the back of the police car was quiet. Jaden stared out the window, watching the familiar streets roll past. He wasn't handcuffed, he wasn't in trouble, but sitting there still made his stomach tighten. When they pulled up to his house, his dad was already waiting on the porch. Isaiah Collier, broad-shouldered, buzz-cut, military posture, even after all these years. He didn't say a word as Jaden stepped out of the car, but his eyes said enough. Douglas walked up to him. Mr. Collier, your son had a run-in with some bikers tonight. We just wanted to make sure he got home safe. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Bikers? Jaden spoke up. They tried to jump me. I defended myself. Isaiah's gaze flicked to him, then back to Douglas. That true? Douglas nodded. From what we gathered, your boy didn't start anything. Just finished it. He pulled something from his pocket. The knife Bulldog had pulled. One of them had this. Isaiah took the knife, turning it over in his hands. His expression stayed unreadable. They still out there? Douglas sighed. For now, but we'll be keeping an eye on them. He turned back to Jaden. Stay alert, kid. Guys like that don't always let things slide. Jaden nodded. He already knew that. The cops left, and for a few seconds it was just silence between Jaden and his dad. Isaiah finally spoke. You hurt? No. Good. His dad studied him. You handled yourself? Jaden nodded. Isaiah didn't say anything right away. Why? Then finally he spoke. Come inside. Jaden followed him in, expecting a lecture. But instead Isaiah just walked into the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and sat at the table. Jaden stood there, unsure what to say. Finally, Isaiah exhaled. You know what happens next, right? Jaden sat across from him. They'll come back. Isaiah met his eyes. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but men like that don't forget. He leaned forward. So tell me, what's the plan? Jaden thought about it. Stay ready, stay aware. Isaiah nodded, and Jaden hesitated. Don't go looking for trouble. Isaiah's expression softened just slightly. Good. He sat back. You're strong. But strength without discipline, that's just recklessness. Jaden absorbed the words. His dad wasn't angry. He was preparing him. After a long pause, Isaiah spoke again. I'm proud of you. Jaden blinked. That wasn't something he heard often. Isaiah continued. Not because you fought, but because you kept control. That's the difference between a hothead and a warrior. Jaden nodded slowly. He understood. Outside, the night stretched on, quiet again. But Jaden knew this wasn't over. He didn't know when, didn't know how, but Bulldog would be back. And when that day came, Jaden would be ready. Strength isn't about knowing how to fight. It's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. Jaden didn't win because he was the strongest. He won because he was disciplined, because he kept his head when others lost theirs. Bullies rely on fear, but when you take that fear away, they lose their power. Not everyone is trained to fight, but everyone can train themselves to stay calm, stay aware, and stand their ground when it matters most. If you ever find yourself in a situation where someone is trying to intimidate you, remember you don't have to be the biggest. You don't have to be the loudest. You just have to be in control, and that's what real strength looks